I'm not talking about dynamic tag-based personalization where you just drop generic stuff in there. I'm talking about true personalization where you spend, it doesn't have to be a huge amount of time, 5 or 10 minutes, going through their social media, looking at what their company initiatives are.
A relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Hey, welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. My name is Ethan Butte, and I host the CX or Customer Experience series here on the show. And today I've got Jeremy Donovan. He's the Senior Vice President of Sales Strategy at SalesLoft, a sales enablement platform. And Jeremy brings some great sales strategy tips, as you might expect. Some really practical, down-to-earth stuff, like things they've seen by measuring 1 billion engagements with cadence-based communication out to prospects and customers. He also talks about the single most important handoff in our businesses and how to manage it better. He gives us some very specific tips about what not to do from a sales perspective. And he talks about the relationship with marketing and with CS. I know you're going to get a lot from this conversation with Jeremy Donovan. Jeremy, welcome to the Customer Experience Podcast.
Thanks, Ethan. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I was really excited to have you on. You have such an interesting, wide-ranging background in marketing, sales, a variety of product roles. You're also the author of 5 books, including Predictable Prospecting and How to Deliver a TED Talk. I don't know if we'll have the time to get into all of that, even though I really want to. In addition to your adjunct professor work at NYU, would love to talk about that, but we may not get there because we're talking customer experience today. So before we get into that, and before I ask you to define it, tell us a little bit more about yourself and about SalesLoft for folks who may not be familiar.
Yeah, just at a high level, as you described, I guess I'm a jack of many trades and probably master of none. For the last few years, I've focused really on sales strategy, and what drew me there was I have an analytical background, and what drew me to sales strategy is sales, as many disciplines before it, has become as much art. Or I should say as much science as art. So that's really the draw for me, is how can I apply analytical techniques to understanding how to improve the way that customers buy and then the way that customers renew and get retained. So that's what drew me there. And then for SalesLoft, I think you did a great overview. I was a customer of SalesLoft for 3 or 4 years before I joined. Loved the product and what it could do to help to help people basically orchestrate their workflow via phone, email, and social, and so on. So that's what drew me here.
That's excellent. We are also customers of SalesLoft, and I was chatting with one of our marketing team members out there who said, "Oh, I love it." He uses our Chrome extension, the BombBomb Chrome extension, to record videos, drop the HTML into some of his emails as the cadence recommends, and then that video play is a link click that then stays in SalesLoft. So we love it as well. We find it really useful, and so really appreciate you being on. Again, I always like to nail down your definition of customer experience before we go forward. I've received many really great and interesting answers, and interesting again for the variety of them. So from your perspective, when I say customer experience, what does that mean to you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I always peel the onion, I guess. So my top level thing in customer experience is really about especially in B2B, is really about ROI. I mean, I could get touchy-feely about it, but I think at the end of the day, the customer experience is whether or not you actually receive the return on investment that you're looking for, whether that's 2x, 5x, 10x, whatever it happens to be. If I peel the onion on that, where I think maybe my answer might be a little more nuanced, is I think about a pre-sales customer experience and I think about a post-sale customer experience. And at the end of the day, the measure for me is in the pre-sales part of it, I really want to make sure that a prospect trusts that I am the right partner to help them achieve whatever their most pressing business initiative is. And I'd love to talk more about that because that gets into differentiation. And then the measure, obviously, of success there is whether or not they buy. And then on the post-sale side, it is heavily tied to renewal, but it's about achieving the results that they were expecting. And my measure of whether or not you delivered a great customer experience is whether they renew. That to me is the ultimate test of success. And I guess there's renewal, and then there's like evangelized renewal, right? Those NPS equals 10 people. Those are the ones you really want.
Yeah, it's great. This achieving the result, I think where a lot of people kind of miss a little bit of the most important piece there that you offered is achieving the desired result. You can do a lot of crazy, fun, over-the-top stuff and produce really good comments. But to your point, at the end of the day, if I'm not getting a return on the investment I made in your product or service, I'm not getting the experience that I paid for. So it's easy to fall into the love trap and the all the crazy stuff that people can do, but it's all of that combined that produces the experience. I want to go into your specialty here, which is again that pre-sale side in particular. Talk a little bit about sales prospecting, that balance of the data-driven side of it, along with, you said trust is one of the single most important things there, and there's an opportunity to differentiate. Give me a little bit on your approach to sales prospecting.
Yeah, I'll probably split those things into two questions, and I'll start with the piece which is all about trust. There was there's kind of popular book out right now called Sales Differentiation. It's one of the better books I've read in a while, and I'm a book a week person. So that one, probably one of I think Lee Saltz, SALZ, is the author. That one does a really great job of saying the following, right? Which is, think about 4 levels of value. The first level is your product and features. And, just in our space, we have competitors. In your space, we have competitors. And the competitors often look pretty similar. So it's darn hard to compete on features and on the features of the platform. The second thing is actually in some ways customer success. Like everyone says they have the best customer success. And if you're a prospect, I'm on both sides, right? Like I buy and I sell. And it's hard for me when I'm buying to really know who has the ultimate best customer success unless you've experienced it. Then the third is ROI, right? Everyone's got an ROI calculator. The ROI calculators pretty much all look the same. They say the same thing. They can be manipulated. Or even if you put in your own data, it comes up with crazy great ROI. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be talking to them. So those first 3 levels are relatively undifferentiating. And what the author talks about is the 4th level, which is, he doesn't exactly put in this words, but these are the words that I put in based on my experience when I was at Gartner. We used to talk about it this way. We used to say that the way you truly differentiate is for the prospect to, again, trust that you are the right partner to help them achieve their most pressing business initiative. And for me, if I relate that to the storytelling world, that's all about, it's a show, don't tell, right? You hear about that in storytelling. It's a show, don't tell thing. So like, how do you show somebody that you really are the right partner? A good example of maybe the way that we would do that is today, actually, I was on a call with a prospect. And while I was on the call, I went to their website and I hit their request a demo button. And then I began to track how long it took me to get a response from them. And then once I get the response, so I can benchmark that versus all the times I've done that. And then once I get the response, I can actually give them constructive feedback on tuning their messaging in ways that will be more effective given the data science that we've done. So it's a long-winded answer, but like if I deliver that report to them on their inbound response, both benchmark and best practice, I am showing them, right? I'm not just telling them that I'm going to help them achieve value. I'm showing them in the pre-sale process that I can absolutely crush what they're doing. And if they, I'll summarize it by saying, if they trust that I'm going to help them during the pre-sale process, they can only imagine how much more I'll do for them from an experience point of view once they become customers. So that's kind of my take on that.
That's great. When in the relationship do you go to that step, right? So the call you were on today, just kind of reverse engineer it for a minute. Like, what led up to that kind of diagnosis and prescription and demonstration of real value?
I mean, I try to do it as early as I possibly can because, right, we are all, with maybe the exception of, I don't know, LinkedIn or something like that, or Google, like we're all in a head-to-head competitive battle. And the earlier you can start to establish authenticity, the earlier you can start to deliver value, I think the better. I mean, you could argue that if you try to give too much value too early, that you might be wasting your time, that you're giving free consulting. It's not like I'm going to go crazy to do this, but I think you should do it as early as possible. And to the extent that you can find, the holy grail, right, is that you can add value in ways that are relatively lightweight, but high value. I think back to, HubSpot had great traction with, like, they had this HubSpot marketing grader or website grader. It probably still exists out there. When I was a CMO, I thought that was insanely valuable because I could just put our website in and it would tell me what to do. And that was a zero, right? I mean, it had some fixed costs that they had to develop that, but once it was out there, they got tremendous lead generation out of it, and it gave a lot of value to people. So I'm always looking for things like that. And to me, hitting a request a demo button and benchmarking is relatively, lowish effort. It's not completely automated, but it's extremely high value on the other side.
That's excellent. And I loved HubSpot as your example there. I got mad, like a decade before I was ever in a position to subscribe to their service, I was receiving value from them. Great name brand, great experience all the way along. And I've also used that website grader. Talk about how the team does sales prospecting for SalesLoft. Talk about the SalesLoft sales team. Obviously, you have a great software platform. And again, we're customers. What does that process look like? And how do you use your own tool in that process?
Yeah, sure. So as you would imagine, given what we do, we're pretty structured in how we do things. So I guess it starts with targeting accounts that we have an ideal customer profile that we go after, right? And that's geography, size, region, geography, size, and industry. They're the usual kind of triumvirate of things, but then also things like their tech stack and other factors. So we start out with that ideal customer profile, and then we are account-based. So we assign all of those accounts out to individual salespeople to engage. It's not a kind of a random thing. We're very intentional about that. Then within those accounts, right, we want to find the people within those accounts that we want to go after. And we use, a lot of different data platforms to identify the right people. Lately, all the data platforms seem to all be converging, right? Because Discover.org has been buying everything up. But my favorite for years and years has been ZoomInfo, which they too just got acquired by Discover.org. So all roads lead there. We also obviously huge users and fans of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So those are our basically two major people finding platforms. And then we drop those into our cadences. So we try to follow best practice there. We're drinking our own champagne. I guess that's the way you're supposed to say it now. Right. So drinking our own champagne, the cadences that we have follow what a certain, what some experts have recommended, like Topo, who's a in sales engagement specialist, research and advisory firm, but then our own data science team. We're approaching 1 billion interactions that our customers have had, and we comb through those interactions and figure out what are the best things to do. So we tune our subject lines based on what works. We tune our greetings based on what works. We tune the body of the email based on what works. We even tune the sign off. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that. On the subject line, we know that one-word subject lines are actually the best, and you shouldn't exceed 4. On the greeting, we know that saying hey and then the person's first name is better than hello or hi, or just using the person's first name. So I might say, hey, Ethan. In the body of the email, we know we want to keep the body of the email as short as possible, but certainly no more than about 100 words. And we know not to use bullets in the body of the email, things like that. And then in the sign-off, we actually looked at all kinds of different sign-offs, things like hi, hey, sorry, sign off. So cheers, regards, thank you, thanks, and so on. I used regards for about 20 years. And lo and behold, regards is the second worst thing you can do. The best thing you can do is actually use the word best. So now all of our emails start with, hey, Ethan, a short body, and then best Jeremy. Mm-hmm. So we're using those sorts of things to tune the individual language. And then we also tune what step to do when, right? When to email, when to call, when to do a social touch. So we're tuning all those things constantly.
That's excellent. Talk about now how you balance the hard and soft side. I mean, you're obviously deeply aware of it. You've used words like authenticity and trust, which I think we can call kind of the soft side because it's difficult to quantify those things, although you obviously see it in the results. What's easier to see is the hard side of email reply, return phone call, demo set, demo held, closed one, whatever all that may be. How do you balance in this? Like, where do you see or experience or can you measure the know, like, trust, comfort, confidence part of the, particularly in pre-sale? How do you balance those two in terms of, do you reverse engineer the trust out of what seems to be working?
Yeah, I guess not. In some ways, not really. I mean, I'll also split into two pieces, right? There's the top of the funnel stuff where you really don't have a lot of opportunity other than the messaging that you use to establish trust. And then there's mid and late funnel where you're actually managing an opportunity and you have a lot more opportunity, you have a lot more chance to do that. So in the early part, the authenticity comes through personalization. That's something we're especially big on. We are anti mass blasting. We're anti. We support automation, but I guess I would say we support thoughtful automation to do that when it's appropriate. But if I kind of blend numbers and the hard side and the soft side, we know that personalizing up to 20% of a template that you start out with for an email leads to a nearly 2x higher response rate. So that just proves that, I mean, that personalization, right, is the authenticity. And I'm not talking about dynamic tag-based personalization where you just drop generic stuff in there. I'm talking about true personalization where you spend, it doesn't have to be a huge amount of time, 5 or 10 minutes, going through their social media, looking what their company initiatives are, looking at a 10K or a 10Q, like really doing something that most machines really can't possibly pull off. It's like what you did before we talked, looking at my LinkedIn profile and the books that I've written and so on. Like, you can learn a lot about me with my digital footprint. So we'll try to do that. I think once you're engaged in an opportunity, like, yes, there is sales process that you need to follow, but what is it people say that, people, they buy on emotion and they justify on ROI and data. Mm-hmm. And I think that is very true. I do think you buy from people that you know and like and trust, even when, even in the business to business context. If I'm buying something, especially if it's something big, I know that my job might depend on the success of that purchase. So I got to really trust that you're going to be there for me.
Yeah, so they're just deeply, deeply intertwined. That was a great passage with a ton of great takeaways, by the way. I'm going to have to double back on that just to pick up what you've learned from a billion different interactions and touch points. So again, you've led teams in marketing, sales, product strategy, new product development, product management, market research, acquisitions. I think you're in a unique position relative to myself and some of my other guests to kind of see holistically the end-to-end nature of the customer experience and where all those connections and handoffs are. Do you have any tips for folks on structuring or managing or measuring or deftly handing off from one person to another inside the organization as the relationship evolves? Do you have any kind of high level, just from your purview over several functions that deeply affect the customer experience? Do you have anything to offer there as a high level ideas or strategies, or even a specific story?
Yeah, I mean, I like that question too. A bunch of thoughts were coming to me during the course of the engagement that you have with someone for the whole life cycle, I guess, customer life cycle from even before they buy. I think the most critical one that I would assume your listeners and other guests have probably talked about in the past is that handoff from sales to customer success, or from the hunters to the farmers to account management, whatever you call the function. I think that's so often broken, and the frustration on the customer part is to make sure that all the stuff that they shared with you during the pre-sale process is communicated afterwards. I used to work for a company called CB Insights, and I thought they were really great at that handoff process. And one of the things that they did was that they had basically a dossier that the account executive would have to fill out with a prescribed set of questions of things that they had learned during the sales process, and they handed that off to the customer success folks. And in that handoff, they would do a meeting in advance to make sure that the customer success person was fully ramped and wasn't asking the same questions that had been asked before. I think having some sort of structure around that is incredibly powerful. Whether that's just we tried different things when I was there. We tried it in Salesforce. We tried it in documents, and I think in the end, like, the document was perfectly sufficient. Better that it's in Salesforce for the long term, but less clunky, in some ways less clunky in a document. So I think that's probably the most critical handoff. Two more came to mind. The second one that came to mind is I'd lived through times where we moved accounts. Like, let's say you went from a non-geographic or industry is even better, a non-industry-based customer success team, and you wanted to segment them by industry, right? Because you thought that was a better thing to do. Mm-hmm. One thing I've learned over the course of my career is, like, if you're going to do that, do it gradually, right? Don't just move all your customers, because that's going to break so many relationships, and you're solving an internal problem, but not necessarily solving an external problem. So what I've tended to do with those kinds of transitions is to say, okay, I've got customer success person, Wilma, Fred, and Bam Bam. I'm going to use the Flintstones, I guess. And I've got those three people. And maybe Wilma's going to be tech companies, Fred's going to be pharmaceutical companies, and Bam Bam's going to be financial services companies. As new accounts come on, I'm going to assign the new accounts based on those industries to those people. But I'm not going to do a big move of all the existing accounts to align that overnight. That I've seen go badly too many times. So that's another kind of handoff thing, is that you just don't assume that you can hand off so easily. And if you do need to do it, hand off after the renewal happens, right? You don't want to hand off mid-contract. Do it after the renewal. The customer's still pissed. I mean, I know I've been handed off post-renewal and I don't like it, but I understand it. You know what I mean? And that new person has a year to deliver value to me. That's two. And then I promised three. So the third one, which I think is still broken almost everywhere, is the relationship between product and the customer, right? The product team really needs access to customers either directly or indirectly through the sales team to get feedback on what's going on. And I think far too often there's a big disconnect between those between those folks. I think the best I've seen that, sales, I don't want to overtalk SalesLoft, so I'm trying to use other examples from the other part of my career. One of the best I've seen that was definitely at Gartner, that we were extremely intentional about getting directly to the customer to understand what was working, what wasn't working, so we could make improvements. But what was still missing, though, and what's often missing is that link between the customer success or sales team and product. And I don't know if you have an answer to that. I'd love some insight on how to do that better, but that's a universal problem, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. We try we try to break down walls. We're about 120 people here at BombBomb, and certainly we're not expert at that either. But really, it just starts with breaking down silos through exposure and communication. We don't really have any formal processes. But product is, we evolved product and put some product managers into place specifically for everything that is to be, and another manager over everything that already is. One who's forward-looking and building, and the other one who is maintaining and improving and revising. Once we got that nuance and got a couple great women in those positions, that really kind of opened it up for more and better feedback. But it's still, as you said, extremely difficult. It's broken in most places.
Yeah.
Hey, I would love to do an entire episode on presentation skills. You've written books on it. I'm sure it plays a major role in the sales function as well as probably the CS function, just some basic skills that are transferable throughout someone's day or week. But in honor of letting people go at the end of their workout or at the end of their run or their lunchtime walk, we try to keep this to about 20 to 30 minutes. I always like to give people, because relationships are our number one core value here. And I always like to give you an opportunity to thank or mention a person or multiple people who've had a really positive impact on your life or on your career. And to give a shout out, you've already given a couple with HubSpot and CV Insights, but give a shout out to another company that you think is doing customer experience very well.
Yeah, I mentioned Gartner just before as well. I mean, Gartner is maniacal about process-driven customer experience, and they know when to engage a customer in order to maximize the probability that the customer will renew. So I think from a data-driven point of view, that's a good one. And I was trying to remember, I had a great B2C customer experience lately where somebody followed up with me for a service that they didn't even, really have to. And I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but I think that's the thing is like when you give that really human touch to people that they're not expecting, that I think are the breakthrough experiences. So although I can't remember the one, and I'm embarrassed that I can't, because I was thinking, wow, that was pretty insane, and I'm very limited in the social media that I use, but I was going to somehow try to figure out how to put it up on social media. But I think that's it. It's delivering unexpected value occasionally.
Well, and that human touch piece is the thing. We talked about it a little bit here and even a little bit more pre-recording about finding those spots. Well, and you did it well here, and talking about what are the things that add a lot of value, or in this case, a really significant impact that aren't super heavyweight. It's going to be difficult to cost justify those in an immediate sense. Like if someone made a personal touch to you, let's just say you spent, in the scenario you just offered, $50 or $100, it might be difficult to cost justify it, but through word of mouth, repeat purchasing, et cetera, a systematic approach to that would be almost certainly ROI positive.
Oh, yeah. I just remembered it, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was...
I was just stalling there, so it would be...
Yeah, that was great. So I just remembered it. I needed... one of my sons was parked somewhere, and the car got hit while he was inside the building. And so I needed some auto body repair. So it was actually the auto body place. And it's just like any single, owner operator auto body place that you go into. And I felt that they had my best interest in mind, right? A lot of people worry about that kind of experience. I felt like the owner operator, the guy's name is John Scully, I thought that he had my best interest in mind. Like he was finding ways to save money on the repair, because this one I was going to do out of pocket to avoid affecting my insurance. And he found ways to do things that were super unusual. And he was advising me on not to make certain repairs because the car wasn't worth those repairs. Who does that, right? That to me was unexpected value, right? He was saving me money, and he could have taken me to the cleaners because I was willing to do whatever he said. I mean, that's kind of I operate on a trust then verify principle most of the time. And maybe I shouldn't, but I think you can read most people accurately. And I think most people have a good heart, like that guy knows that his business depends on referrals, even if I don't go back to him. So yeah, I think that's the sort of thing. It was like unexpected customer care.
I love that story. It's exactly right. He'll take more money down the line by not taking unnecessary money today. This has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it so much. And again, I would love to have you back to talk presentation skills because they're so valuable. If someone wants to follow up with you and or with SalesLoft, what are a couple ways they might do that?
Yeah, the best way to get me is definitely LinkedIn. I have one form of social media I use, and that's it. So just look for Jeremy Donovan on LinkedIn. I have 3 E's in my first name, a little unusual, but it's Jeremy. So connect with me there. I'll accept your connection and would love to get to know you.
Awesome. Thanks. And I assume SalesLoft is at salesloft.com?
Yeah, super easy.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your insights today. It was excellent. I really, really value your time, and I hope all the listeners do as well.
Thanks. What a great pleasure, Ethan. Thank you.
The customer experience is everyone's responsibility. It's built from every single touch point with the organization, whether it's from the sales seat or a CS, customer service support, or customer success seat, a marketing seat, an executive seat, the front desk. All of us are responsible for the customer experience. If you want to hear more conversations about how to do this better, about how to coordinate across teams and functions, about how to measure and improve the customer experience, check out the Customer Experience Podcast. You can do that in Apple Podcasts and iTunes, as well as in Spotify, or even in my blog, bombbomb.com/podcast. There we run through every single episode, provide video clips and high-level takeaways, as well as links to connect with all of the guests. Again, my name is Ethan Butte. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the B2B Growth Show.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.